Okay, today I have the great pleasure to speak to somebody whose work I've been kind of following on the fringes for a long time. His name's Ross Healy, but people who roam around the internets will probably have run across the moniker that he often uses, which is called VICMOD, VICMOD. He also has released a lot of music under the name Cray, and actually, it's some of my favorite electronic music that I've run into recently. So I am really excited to get a chance to talk to Ross. So with that, I'll shut up and we'll talk to Ross. Hey, Ross, how's it going?
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot for taking the time. It's actually, I wish the listeners could understand kind of the weird manipulations we had to go through in order to find a time that was going to be convenient for both you and I. You're located in Melbourne, right?
Yeah, in Australia. Yeah, I
Yeah.
live in country. Well, that area is called Victoria,
Okay.
and I live in country Victoria. So I'm about an hour out of.
Okay, but that also gives us a sense of where the Vic mod name comes from, Victoria
Yes,
Modulars, right? Very,
exactly. Yes.
very interesting. So why don't we start off by having you describe, for people who aren't familiar with your work, have you describe a little bit of the things that you do?
Well, I'm a huge synth fan. I'm 51, and I think when I was about 18, well, not even that, probably about 15, I got into synthesizers, played drums, played bass, but have always pretty much stuck with synthesizers. The thing I love about synthesis is that you don't have to make sounds like a bass guitar or a drum kit or anything. I do love the fact that if your brain's there, you can create anything, and that's the thing I love about it. So I've grown up listening to electronic music, and yeah, I think one of the things which is fantastic, I grew up listening to a lot of bands like Skinny Puppy and stuff like that, and I could never go to gigs and see them.
Hmm.
So they would become these abstract things. All the records would become abstract paintings for me.
Right, right.
And then if I see, like I did see Skinny Puppy live on a video, and I was a little bit, I mean, they're fantastic, but I was a little bit disappointed because to me it was a bit like an Alice Cooper concert, whereas I'd never seen them. And in my head, I had these amazing things. So I think in some ways living on the bottom of the planet, or depending on how you look at it, from where you're looking at it from, I like that alienation of not being able to go and see someone play. And again, that's where synthesis is fantastic. I call it sonic painting. And, anything that you're doing with synthesis is sonic painting. So, I mean, I've grown up I used to do techno records and drum and bass and industrial music, but for the last 20 years, I've pretty much done more abstract electronic music.
In addition to your own work, you also run a label that has quite a few different people on it. Is the VicMod Records label still active?
It is.
Is it-
I've had some life things that get in the way,
I
so
see.
I've kind of haven't really done much with it in the last year, but it's always active. It's just a matter of people sending me stuff that I'm interested in, and then wanting to put it out. Or if I've got something that I think might be different to my Cray releases, I might put under a different name, which I've done quite. I've done quite a few things under different names on the label as well.
Oh, interesting.
But
That's
it's still definitely going.
well, one of the things I noticed is that you have one of my favorite synthesists is listed as one of the artists on your label, which is the late Richard Lanehart.
Yes.
Who what's funny is I think he and I look a lot similar. So there have been a number of occasions where people have said, I think I saw you doing a demo of Buchla systems. I was like, well, it's not me. It's one of my favorite guys out there. How did you
Yeah.
get how did you get in touch with him? Was it just a thing where he was shopping a record around, or did you seek him out?
That's a good question, and it is quite a while ago. I
Mhm.
think we were all on the Muff Wiggler forum, and a lot of us were into the modular stuff before. I mean, now it's hugely popular,
Right, right.
but probably 13 years ago, it wasn't that popular. And there were probably only, maybe 6 companies making things, where now there's over 200. But so with Richard, That's a good question. I would have contacted him. Yeah, he probably put something up somewhere, and I just thought, oh wow, this is interesting. Anything that really I find unique and interesting is what I would like to put out on VICMOD. So yeah, I probably heard something that he'd done
That caught your ear, huh? Yeah.
And contacted him, and he was we put out two physical releases when we were doing physical releases. So yeah, we put out 2 of his albums.
Very cool.
And so I'm sure that's how it happened. But it makes me I forget how long ago that actually was.
Yeah, well, it kind of points to how long you've been doing this, because there really is some history in the label that you have. You have kind of a neat vault of some great releases.
Yeah, thank you. I have not thought of it like that before, but it's just love. It's just my love of wanting to hear interesting electronic music or music in general. And this would have been even before Bandcamp, I'm pretty sure. We were just a little bit prior to that. And I just feel like a lot of music doesn't get heard, and majority of the people who say they love all kinds of music don't.
Yeah, right.
They like
so true.
commercial music, commercial radio stations, and stuff like that. So yeah, it was always a thing for me that I always wanted to have a label, and I always wanted to put something out that was, that other people might think, oh Christ, I've not heard anything like this before, or these people are just buried. Sorry, wrong word there, but they're not that well known, and so it's great to be able to help anybody out that wants to, that is doing music that's interesting.
Sure, so true. Well, I had an opportunity in preparation for this to dive back into your catalog a little bit. And as I mentioned at the head of the discussion, I actually really like your music because it's one of these things where it kind of sits at the crossroads, right? It sits at the crossroads of being composed, but also experimental. And also, it's not, sometimes people who do modular stuff, even their albums end up sounding like demos for a piece of gear. And I know from looking at your photos and stuff that you are a fan of Buchla systems and stuff, but you obviously use a wide variety of gear because the things end up not sounding like a hardware demo, but instead sound like a very personal expression. And I find it really, really attractive. This is the Cray stuff that I'm talking about specifically.
Yeah. Well, again, everybody knows the Buchla bongo sound.
Right.
And my whole thing is with any synthesizer is I want it to become a piece of art. I want it to be unique as possible. That's why I buy these things. This is why I use these things. I just didn't want the Buchla to sound like a Buchla. I'm not sure if I've ever released this, but I have a 45 to an hour track because I grew up listening to shortwave radio.
Okay.
When I was a kid, and I used to love tuning the stations, and you get the frequencies changing, and I love that more than listening to the proper radio stations.
Right.
And so I did a whole Buchla album called Dedicate Shortwave, and I'm not 100% sure if I ever put it out, but it's 45 minutes of I love it because it reminds me of being a kid. There's things coming and going. There's Balinese, gamelan sounds, but all done on the Buchla.
Interesting.
And a lot of people wouldn't pick it up as being a Buchla album at all.
Right.
And in fact, I should get off my bum and look and see if I ever did put it out. I should do it. People would enjoy. I enjoy it. I think someone else might do.
Yeah, please do, because that kind of thing. You're right. That harkens back to a certain kind of childhood, and one that I think people. It's funny. I picked up a shortwave radio on the cheap a few months ago, and I was really surprised at how little shortwave radio actually exists anymore. Because most of these worldwide stations just are like, well, we'll just pipe stuff over the internet, and everyone can get that.
Yeah, I mean, also because I live in Australia, I think we had more you'd get the number stations, and you'd get
Right.
some kind of American military kind of things you could hear, but then we'd also get Indonesian music,
Oh, sure.
and that would phase in and phase out when you were, changing the frequencies and stuff, and that had a huge impact on me. I mean, I love gamelan, and I'm
Right.
actually going to a gamelan gig in a couple of days. But yeah, I did same as you. I bought a shortwave radio, and it's just not the same. It's
Yeah.
just a lot more sparse, and
It really
yeah,
is. Although what's interesting, just even imagining the idea of like hearing Indonesian music, but also with that like weird sidebandy kind of thing, kind of drifting in and out. It had to
yeah,
be sort of like a thing that built a synthetic sound in your head from the beginning.
totally. You're spot on. Yeah, it was all alien. Everything was
Right.
alien to me.
Right.
I never knew what gamelan was until I knew I'd heard it, but I didn't know what it was or where it was coming from. But and gamelan is to me, it sounds very electronic. I mean,
Hmm.
a lot of people like the metallic, plinky plonky sounds of synthesizers as well. And well, a lot of world music, all of it's fantastic.
Right.
But yeah, you're
So
spot on about it.
yeah, so one of the things I like talking to people about is their beginning story. You've kind of cracked a little bit of some of the ideas of where you're coming from, but I'm
Okay.
curious about because one of the things we didn't talk about, and maybe we should talk about this first, is also part of your VicMod thing is that you actually work with people to help teach them to build synthesizers. Is that something that I caught correctly?
We did initially.
Mm-hmm.
I knew nothing at all about soldering.
Oh, okay.
I was interested in it, and I spoke to another guy in Melbourne, and Brett Matterford, and we started VicMod together.
Okay.
I think it lasted maybe a year, but we started off, I think, with about 15 people. Now we've got about 200.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
It's not so much about the building anymore because I don't think anyone. Well, you got to have time to do that. Um,
So
so
true.
now it's mainly more show and tell. People bring in the latest modules or synths or anything that they think anyone's going to be interested in. So yeah, it's more nowadays. Well, it was only for about 2 or 3 years that it was
I
about the
see.
building,
Okay. All right.
because it was also because not everybody was. That you'd have some people who were really good at soldering and some were day one, and it was hard for everybody to stay at the same pace.
Sure. Sure.
And of course, at the same time, you're cracking jokes and having a laugh with everybody. So it,
So
it
maybe not a
so that
lot of
side of it.
modules were being built, right?
Well, we built a lot of the LB design
Oh
modules
yeah,
because
sure. Okay, right.
he's in Sydney,
Oh, okay.
and Ken Stone, who's
Right.
really well known in the modular world, he lives in Melbourne, or he
Oh,
lives in the opposite side of country Victoria.
I see. Okay.
So we were building the LB modules. I think we probably maybe did about 10 of them,
Interesting.
but we didn't build anything. We didn't create anything ourselves. It was just purely buying kits
Got
and
it.
bulk buying kits and then soldering. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So I'm curious about your background and where you are coming from. Did you come from I mean, first of all, it kind of sounds like you grew up kind of isolated from stuff.
Well, I mean, we had access to. I grew up listening to Kiss and Cheap Trick,
Right.
and then got into Devo. I think Devo and the Human League were the first two electronic bands that really made me look at the world and music differently.
Mhm.
So we had we definitely had access to commercial music.
Right, I
Um,
see.
Melbourne's has always been very alternative music wise,
Okay.
and there's bands like Nick Cave and Jim Thirlwell from Fetus, and and Australia's did have a lot of alternative kind of bands.
Okay.
So it wasn't I think it was more that I was more isolated. Up
I see.
until when the internet existed, I knew 4 other people who were into industrial music,
Mm,
who loved Severed Heads or Front 242 or something, or Nitzer Ebb or something. I knew 4 people, and then it wasn't until the internet came along that you realise, there's people all around the world who are into the same thing. But I
right.
kind of like that. I kind of like that isolation. because it really, I guess it just pushes you to, I don't know, live in it, I guess.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, at least my experience was that, so I grew up very, very isolated from everything, didn't even have a lot of radio and stuff like that available to me. But, even after I came, first of all, you said something earlier that really resonated with me, which is you heard the music, but you hadn't really seen it in action. And so you kind of build an image of what it must be like.
Yeah.
And it's kind of discouraging when you see what it's actually like, maybe.
Well, that's probably why I don't like seeing bands. I don't really like going to gigs, because although when I do gigs is when I go out, but it's just not the same, because you've got this movie that you create from the music,
Right.
or images you create, and when it turns out to be, four guys playing instruments, maybe a bit drunk on stage, it's not the same thing.
Yeah, that's true. That's so
Yeah.
true. So did you grow up as like playing instruments and being like in band in high school and stuff, or not so much?
Well, my uncle, our family's originally from England, and my uncle has always been a musician and still is. I remember as a little kid going to England, and my uncle had long hair and a beard, and he had a snare drum, and he took it out and let me hit it. I instantly knew I want to be like this person, because I got the vibe that he's a bit more free. He wasn't, it wasn't society. He wasn't sitting in an office working in a bank.
Right.
And I was only about 4 or 5 when I thought I want to be like this person. So from that, I played drums. So I, again, used to listen to Kiss records and play drums along to Kiss records every day, and Cheap Trip records and stuff like that. And then I was in a band called Sunday Engineering. We never performed live, but we used to rehearse in a factory. And my girlfriend at the time, Nadia, who's still one of my best friends, she used to play bass. I played drums. And one of my other friends, Peter Burke, who's worked with Lisa Gerrard and stuff, he was on synths.
Okay.
And after a time, probably getting more aware of, being interested in females at that stage, I thought, well, I don't want to be at the back. Even though we'd never done a gig, I just felt like I want to be up the front a bit more. And
Okay.
so I started didn't play drums ever again after that, and picked up the bass. And at that time, Peter and I, we're in a band called Eden, and we released some stuff on Night Shift Records in England. And it was kind of Dead Can Dancey-ish, ethereal stuff. And I played bass on 2 of those records. And then I got to the stage where techno was just starting, and I was so impressed with thinking, finally, there's some music coming out that doesn't have human vocals on top, that, woe is me, life is hard. So I was rapt about that. Now, saying that, I did then get I then started a band called This Digital Ocean that was kind of industrial. I used to call it fucked pop, FUKD pop, because it had elements of pop music, but it was all very strange and stuff. So I used to write most of the music on the synths doing that, and I sang, because at that stage I was kind of wanting to say stuff. But again, after 2 years of doing that, I felt like I'd just given my soul away, and I didn't ever sing ever again. I didn't write lyrics ever again. And then I went purely to electronic music and started doing techno albums, drum and bass, ambient, all that kind of stuff. And then got into I'm trying to think, probably 90s, there was the Mego Records era of Finesse, Glitch, Pimon, who's from Sydney. There was that more kind of glitch electronic music.
Right.
And that was getting me into the more experimental side of music again, which I loved, because I grew up on things like Neubaut and Leibach and stuff like that. So yeah, since then I've always been either working on laptops or modular synths. I don't consider myself a modular synth artist. I'm a synthesizer. Well, I'm a music artist, but primarily use primarily use synthesizers.
Right. Now, it's interesting, though, to me that your background has kind of this really heavy and kind of mainline rock thing, and but when I listen to your stuff now, what I actually hear is like really a mix of a love of techno with a love of
Mm-hmm.
sort of like glitchy and experimental stuff.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's still that you carry any influences from that rock slash metal slash industrial time frame, or have or did techno kind of take it over?
I don't personally hear. I don't actually hear techno in my music. I definitely hear experimental. I
Interesting.
definitely don't hear any rock. I know I'm the kind of person where I'm so focused and into something at the time that I devour it and love it to death. That then I move on and I don't. It's in my head all the time. I don't need to ever listen to it again because I know it inside out. And so
Right, right.
I've really loved it to death.
Have
And
you've internalized it in some way, right?
yeah. So, I mean, I don't really listen to. I mean, I'll still have time for Ortega, Aphex Twin, Luke Vibert, stuff like that. But that's really, I don't really listen to that much techno anymore. I lived it. I definitely lived it. I ran a club in the late 90s. But yeah, I just, look, I know it sounds egotistical. I just feel like it's me. When I do the music, I don't hear any influences, and
I see.
I really try to not make sure there isn't anything there.
Interesting, because the reason that I say that I hear techno influence is because you're one of the few people whose work, at least in the stuff I heard, oftentimes has a rhythm. And a lot of experimentalists seem to either forego the rhythm completely, i.e., going into a very ambient realm, or
Hmm.
are into making the rhythm kind of almost indiscernible, right? So it's more like tumbling forward than it is kind of a rhythmic beat. But your stuff,
Yeah.
a lot of your stuff has the sense, if not the actuality of a 4 and 4 beat, there's still a sense of an overriding rhythm that's what kind of speaks to me, actually.
But yeah, you're right then. I haven't really thought of it like that before. And I guess me growing up playing drums, there is that, there must be that there. And I did do another album called Zen and the Art of Hard Disk Recording. And again, I think that's on VICMOD Records. I'm not sure. And that was really interesting because that was the last real thing I did with a quote unquote drum machine
Okay.
sound.
All right.
Because I just released drum and bass records in England at that stage. And anyway, so I stupidly sold some like a Roland Jupiter 8 to buy a 486 piece Windows PC. And this thing was the worst at MIDI. The timing was atrocious. It was
Uh-huh.
just horrible. People were saying you should have got a Mac, but I thought, okay, well, I'm going to use the limitation of this machine, and so I did a whole album where it is very percussive, but there's nothing at any stage where the beats are the same throughout any track. They're all very off kilter, and I think looking at that, I think that was me trying to destroy the formula of percussive techno music. I think
Okay,
that was
right.
me trying to destroy that.
Got it.
So there, from that, I think, yeah, okay, yeah, they're probably. I don't think there's any tracks that I've done where there are beats all the way through or anything like that. I definitely don't set out to do things like that. But yes, you again going around a long way around. Yeah, there are rhythmic elements in there, but they're not obvious. I'd say they're very, probably just the pulse of life in
Right.
the track.
Yeah, in a number of your releases you kind of list the different machines that you use, and you kind of have access to a Buchla, which we've talked about, but you also, it mentions Serge and Eurorack systems.
Yeah,
And I think the mixing and matching of that is what kind of helps make it so that the music speaks rather than it being a stand-in for an instrument demo, right? I think that's really
yeah.
that helps do that. What for you of those systems though is the Buchla your primary instrument?
Well, strangely, I'm sitting in front of my Buchla and my Euro system at the moment, and I haven't touched them for a year and a half.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've completely lost interest in modular synthesis. It's well, I've been doing it. I've been again living it every
Right.
day for probably 15 years.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I actually thought, I'll fire one of the machines up. I get to turning it on, and then I just don't feel inspired,
Interesting.
which I don't mind because that gives me a break from it all.
Right.
But I bought a Surge modular system. That was my first modular, and I absolutely loved it. To me, the Surge is the beast of pure analog synth, modular synth. It's just amazing. It's huge sounding. It is a real beast.
Mm-hmm.
I then bought some Euro modules, and I got Ken Stone to bananify my modules,
I see. Okay.
so I could use it with the Buchla system. So all my early Euro things like Plan B modules, Livewire, Dope for stuff, they were all banana jacks. I'd got them all transferred over to banana jacks, so I could integrate it with the Surge system. Then I started hearing about Don Buchla and these amazing. Well, the 200E system. I read reviews in Sound on Sound and all the keyboard magazines, and you'd see pictures of it, and it just looked, again, like an alien spacecraft. And I've actually got two sons, and I'm divorced now, but I've got two sons, Oscar, who's named after the Oscar synthesizer, and then Max, who's named after Max MSP. And they used to have friends come over, and they'd see me on my Buchla system, and these kids are about 6 or 7, and they'd say, "What is that?" And I used to say, "I'm communicating with the aliens via NASA," and and they totally believe it. So again, the Buchla system, the 200E system, it looks like a Christmas tree meets alien spacecraft. And I loved the design of it. I loved the history of Don Buchla. I hate reading manuals. Absolutely got no time. My whole thing is you just jump on things and learn yourself. And I think that frees you up a lot as well. So I had the Surge system. I felt like I knew it inside out. I didn't have money to have a Surge and a Buchla system. So I sold the Surge system to buy a 12-panel Buchla system.
Okay.
And loved it, but realised very quickly that the Surge system was really, really analog, and then the Buchla system was more analogy digital.
Right.
But it allowed me to create sounds that I couldn't create on anything else. And then kept buying Euro stuff as well, because that's what you do when you're addicted to modular synths. And then I remember buying 2-panel Surge system again, but I only played it for about a month, and then I sold it off again because, again, I just felt like there wasn't anything new to learn from it.
Right.
And maybe that's why I'm not using my modular gear. I haven't used it for a while because I just have to feel inspired and have to feel. I do like the fact that I can forget how to use something, because then I can approach it completely new and enthusiastic again. And maybe that's what I'm doing. Maybe tomorrow I will fire up the Buchla and have a ball with it.
So when you are in the mood to make music now, what do you use?
Well, I have just done an album with an ex-girlfriend. We've nearly finished it, but we've unfortunately split up about 3 months ago. And so I've been using Omnisphere and recordings from so I've got 70 full CDs of modular improvising. So from occasionally I would go and dig into the vaults and okay, well, that we could use that and stuff like that. But I'm not sure if that's going to see the light of day at the moment, because it's just a bit of a difficult time with that. So yeah, I've really been using Omnisphere and my laptop more than anything in the last year. But then also I love the Behringer Model D. That's fun to use. I love the Double Knot by Laurie Mill. To me, that's actually like a little Surge system, the Double Knot. That's really cool. And strangely, I've been getting into, which I never thought I'd do, I'm getting into guitar pedals. I've just come back I went to America probably about a month and a half ago, and I just started getting really obsessed with guitar pedals. the weirdest ones you could possibly get. So I've been getting into guitar pedals a bit of late, and I've actually started playing the guitar, which is an instrument I've always hated. And I think my brain needs something new all the time to try and work with. So I'm never going to be releasing a rock record or guitar riffs or anything. I'm not interested in doing any of that kind of stuff. But I think it's just my brain needs something new to learn. And it is an instrument that I've always called a stick with strings and put down. And I think mainly because that came about, I think because when I used to go to school and I was into Depeche Mode or Devo or or Human League or any electronic bands, all the rock guys at school would always put down electronic music as being gay or not real music or. So I think that's where my kind of hatred for the guitars come from. But I'm coming full circle and I'm starting to play that a bit. But again, I doubt I'm ever going to release anything. I think I'll always stick with just pure electronic music.
I mean, it used to be that if you were going to say that you were going to play guitar, what people felt like you had to do is you had to sit down, learn scales, learn to shred on the guitar, do your best Eddie Van Halen impression, and until you were pulling off Eruption, you just weren't anything, right? One of the things I think that's really interesting with kind of modern right now guitar is that it's going through a kind of a renaissance, or maybe it's already gone through this and is kind of on the tail end of it, where guitar pedals, where almost the guitar pedal becomes the extension of the instrument that makes it synthetic, but also, again, kind of personal. Much with a modular synth, the combination of modules you get and what effects you use and how you plug it into speakers kind of turns it from a generic instrument into your instrument.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what you've hit the nail on the head. I think of guitar pedals as being modular synths. Exactly what it is. I mean, I must say there's an artist called Novella who really got me interested in pedals. She's amazing. I think she's released maybe 7 albums. She's from New York. And to me, she treats music, or her music's, in some ways a lot like the early 2000s. There was a huge cassette scene. It's probably still going, but I haven't really kept up with it. But there was a very huge electronic music cassette scene that wasn't techno music. It was almost harking back to the 80s to some degree, but it wasn't at the same time. And to me, her music, although it's all guitar, is kind of a little bit in that area. She's one artist that I've really started to enjoy of late, and I can see kind of similarities in what I've been doing with the Cray stuff to her guitar stuff.
Interesting. Well, I'm going to have to check that out, because I would say one of the things, and I hinted at it from one direction, maybe I'll come at it a different direction. The thing I liked about your Cray releases is that you didn't necessarily choose to do the obvious, right? Rather, it was clear that you would have something in your head, and then your effort was getting the thing out of your head and onto tape or onto a hard drive. And, using whatever tools at hand that you were able to do that with. It seems to me like there's a real opportunity to do that in a completely different way, but in a similar way with the guitar. I would actually love to hear what you'd come up with as a release.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm doubting that I'll do anything with it, but
you never know, right?
Know.
Yeah.
I know I know myself well enough to not like something, and then the week after, tell someone I don't like something, and the week after I'll be doing it. So yeah, I shouldn't say I won't ever do it, but you never know.
Now that you're using your laptop more as a music making tool than a lot of synths. Now, one of the things you kind of said was that you have like albums and albums and albums worth of synth sounds that you can always tap, which kind of is a neat way to approach doing sound design. But with tools like Omnisphere and stuff, Omnisphere just kind of out of the box can give you almost all the sounds, right? How deep of a dive do you get into your own sound design, or do you focus more on things like melody, harmony, and rhythmic development?
Well, again, you're spot on with Omnisphere. Omnisphere is fantastic. To me, is too fantastic. There's too many amazing sounds in there.
Yeah.
But saying that, I made sure that when I got it, I've made about 200 of my own sounds.
Okay.
But then saying that, it's too easy just to pull up a preset, which I've always been against presets. But then you can, I mean, that's the beauty of it. You can take a preset of Omnisphere, record it as audio, and then slow it down, reverse it. You can take it as far as you can with audio editing as well, which is what I try to do with anything. I try to not make it, oh, that's patch number 47 on blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, I mean...
Back when you said you got that 486 computer that was kind of crap, you named the album, I think, Zen and the Art of Hard Disk Recording. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
I mean, obviously, if the MIDI and timing and stuff was horrible, you must have done everything in the audio domain, right?
Yeah, so I was using SoundForge.
Oh, okay. All right.
And I just edited, I cut everything up to make it wonky. Yeah, and it was a whole album, so it was probably 10 tracks. I would spend all day and all night on it. I didn't have a girlfriend at the time, so obviously I had a lot more spare time. So yeah, I just recorded sounds. I had a Kurzweil K2500 rack mount synth, which I loved. So I would play things into SoundForge and then, just edit the hell out of it. Just go absolutely berserk with editing and printing an echo onto a drum sound and then cutting that drum sound up so the echo goes out of time with itself. And
right.
Yeah, so that album's probably the heaviestly. No, that's not even a word. Oh no, actually that's not true, because I edit the hell out of, when I use Ableton Live, I edit the hell out of anything I'm doing. But yeah, it was SoundForge, and pretty much just SoundForge and the Kurzweil synth back then.
It's interesting because to me, there's something, we don't have a lot of 2-track editor support anymore. Everybody's sort of like, hey, I've got, I'll pour stuff into Ableton or into Logic or into Pro Tools, and all the kind of chop up I need to do, I can do there. But to me, there was always something. I actually started recording in the day of tape, right? And with tape, you put stuff in, and if you were going to manipulate it, you physically manipulated the tape, and once you did that, there was no going back, right? I always loved the way that with a 2-track, much like you, I would use it to sort of like mangle sounds, and it was always interesting to like select a section and then reverse that, and then select a different section, reverse that. Now all of a sudden, like 28% of the original thing is in the right order, other stuff is reversed, then you take another section and you flange that, take another section, reverb it, and then kind of shuffle them around again. You would get the kind of things that you can't really do with other tools. I mean, sure, there are things that'll like chop up and manipulate sounds, but it won't arbitrarily fling effects against them, right? No. Or you'll do things, but it won't necessarily do a great job of messing with the overlap zones. And I think that there was actually a real creative practice that was kind of specific to using those 2-track editors.
Yeah, well, exactly. And that is what that was the, with the Zen and the Art of Hard Disk Recording, that was when I started using, I don't even know it was SoundForge. Yeah, but I wanted to treat anything, and I still do to this day, any recording like a 2-track tape that you can kind of, but yeah, you're not going to get that flange unless you put a flange sound on it or a phasing sound on it. But I mean, also you can record the final track and record that onto cassette and then screw the cassette up, drag it, tie it to the back of a bicycle and ride your bike down the street and then, stuff it up that way.
See what happens, right? Exactly. Unfortunately, we have already kind of burned through our time, but before I let you go, you mentioned that you'd been working on this album with your ex-girlfriend. Sorry about how that went. What would it take to get you back into synths? Because you kind of have a nice stack of them sitting there, man. And I'm wondering what might be the thing that would inspire you to get back into it.
Time. I think having a break from it is the thing that will get me back into it. I think that's all it is. I want to forget how to use things. to be inspired to use them again. So yeah, that's all. Yeah, I think that's all it's going to be. I mean, again, I might get encouraged by this interview today and get on them in 20 minutes or 20 years. I just don't know. I doubt it'll be 20 years.
Right.
It's just going to be time and naivety.
There you go. So I've kind of talked about listening to your music, and I kind of picked it up here and there all over the net. For people who want to really dive into your work, what are the best places to find the things that you think of as indicative of your work?
Well, look on Discogs under Cray or Ross Healy. I'm terrible because there's definitely things that I have released that aren't on there. I haven't put on. I went through a phase where there were lots of cassette releases of Cray stuff, but I've also recorded under Ryu Unishi on VICMOD Records. We've got the VICMOD Ensemble as well. We used to play live. Well, we still do it, whereas we would play live, but it was all improv. So I would say before we went on stage, Alien Forest, and that is all I'd say, and we'd have to create something.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've recorded under This Digital Ocean, Amnesia, Sicko Spongy, Roland Oberheim, Cray, 56K. I'm probably forgetting. There's other names that I've forgotten about. But yeah, have a look on the VICMOD webpage. There's the Game of Life label as well. I think I've released 3 albums on there. Obviously, lots of cassette releases, CD releases, but I like to forget what I've done as well, just so you just keep moving on.
So you can move along, right? Indeed.
Yeah.
Well, Ross, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to have this talk. It was really great to get to hear more about in depth about how you do what you do, and how you've kind of like influenced yourself over the years. It's really it was really fun to learn more about that.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's not often I get to do interviews, and it's great. You probably inspired me to jump on the synths tomorrow.
Well, I hope I have. That would be a great achievement for me. Thank you. All right, and with that, then we will say goodbye. Have a great one.
Thank you very much.
All right, bye. Well, many thanks to Ross for that great chat. I mean, it was really cool to get up to speed on where he's coming from, and what's interesting is subsequent to our discussion, he's actually written me back and has kind of jumped on the synths again, so that's pretty cool. He also has just put together a release of some material that had previously gone unreleased that he wanted me to share with y'all. You can find it on his VICMOD Cray Bandcamp site, or check the show notes to get a direct link. And for those of you who are getting this through Spotify or through Apple Podcasts or one of those kinds of things, you may not know how to get to the show notes. The show notes are found at artmusictech.libsyn.com. If you go there, you will find show notes, little explanations, and appropriate links for each one of the interviews that we do. I want to thank you again all for listening. This is really, I've been getting great numbers as always, and I just really appreciate the fact that everybody is sharing and caring so much about this podcast. With that, I want to thank you and have a great day.